The alliance between humanity and the Volani grew stronger with each passing day, forged in the fire of desperate combat. Dr. Choi Minji worked alongside Volani biotechnicians in the living laboratories of their bioships, creating hybrid weapons that combined human tactical thinking with alien organic technology. The possibilities are incredible, she reported to Admiral Seo during their daily briefing. Their living metal can repair itself mid-battle. Combined with our explosive compounds, we can create ammunition that heals the launcher while devastating the target. The partnership was more than technological. Captain Park So-young helped establish communication networks that allowed real-time coordination between human tactical doctrine and Volani biosystems. For the first time, the peaceful plant people learned to think like predators. "It feels wrong," admitted Tharanel as she watched Volani crews loading human-designed weapons into their living ships. "We've spent 1,000 years learning to create. Now we're learning to destroy." "You're learning to protect," corrected Captain Lee Hyun. "There's a difference." The distinction mattered more than either species initially realized. The Korthak swarm had begun adapting to human tactics, but their hive mind struggled with the concept of protective violence. They understood predation and territorial expansion, but couldn't predict actions motivated by defending others. Colonel Bang Jong-ho exploited this blind spot ruthlessly. His new strategy, Operation Chimera, kept the swarm's collective intelligence constantly off balance by presenting threats it couldn't categorize. "Phase 1 complete," reported Commander Kang Hyun-ju from the diversionary fleet. Her 4 ships had spent 2 days conducting hit-and-run attacks on Korthak positions throughout the outer system, drawing attention away from the real objective. While the swarm focused on these obvious threats, Captain Shin Woo-jin led the true mission, a direct assault on the enemy's central command structure. Intelligence gathered from captured Korthak bioships had revealed the location of their queen ship, a massive organic vessel that coordinated the entire invasion force. The plan was typically human in its audacity. Instead of gathering overwhelming force for a direct assault, they would strike with surgical precision at exactly the moment when the enemy least expected it. "Remember," Lee addressed the combined human Volani strike force, "we're not trying to match their numbers. We're trying to cut off their head." The approach required perfect timing. While Kang's diversionary fleet kept the bulk of the swarm occupied, Shin's assault team used Volani biocamouflage technology to mask their approach. The living ships could mimic the electromagnetic signatures of space debris, making them nearly invisible to Korthak sensors. But the galaxy's major powers had their own plans. Intelligence Officer Moon Dae-yoon intercepted communications that chilled her blood. "Admiral, we have a problem," she reported during the mission briefing. "The Hegemony Council and Synthetic Commonwealth are mobilizing joint fleets. Official reason is humanitarian assistance, but their deployment patterns suggest containment operations." The meaning was clear. The same civilizations that had refused to help the Volani were now preparing to eliminate humanity before they became too dangerous to control. "Admiral," Seo studied the tactical projections with grim understanding. "How long until they arrive?" 6 days, maybe 7, Moon replied. "They're bringing enough firepower to sterilize this entire system." The revelation forced an impossible choice. Humanity could withdraw immediately, preserving their remaining ships but abandoning the Volani to their fate. Or they could press forward with the mission, knowing it would make them targets for every major power in the galaxy. The decision came without debate. "We finish what we started," Lee declared. "The Volani trusted us to protect them. We don't break that trust no matter what it costs." Dr. Yang Hairin's weapons proved their worth during the final approach to the Queen ship. The massive Korthak vessel was surrounded by a defensive fleet of over 50 biocruisers, their organic hulls bristling with adaptive weapons. Traditional tactics would have required hundreds of ships to penetrate such defenses. Humanity had different ideas about what was possible. "Initiate Broken Arrow Protocol," Shin ordered as his strike team reached firing range. The protocol was pure human insanity, a coordinated sacrifice play where every ship would expend its entire arsenal simultaneously, creating a window of opportunity measured in minutes. The surviving vessels would use that window to deliver their primary weapon directly to the target. The easy primary weapon was Lieutenant Commander Yu, Xiong Huan and a team of volunteers carrying enough nuclear explosives to crack a Moon, the initial assault was devastating. Human ships emerged from their biocamouflage like hunting predators, unleashing every weapon they carried in the first 10 seconds of combat. Acid rounds, fragmentation explosives, and gas weapons struck the defensive fleet before the swarm could react. But the real shock came when the Volani ships joined the attack. The peaceful plant people had learned human tactics with terrifying efficiency. Their living vessels darted between Korthak defenders like serpents, their hybrid weapons eating through biomechanical armor that had seemed impenetrable just weeks before. Breakthrough in Sector 4, reported Captain Nam Yunsu from the Jeju. Path to the Queenship is clear. Use. Boarding team launched immediately, their small craft racing through the gap in the enemy formation. Behind them, the strike fleet continued its suicidal assault, drawing fire and attention away from the real mission. The Queenship was a nightmare of organic architecture, its corridors pulsing with alien life. But Yu's team had trained for exactly this scenario. They moved through the living vessel like antibodies attacking an infection, placing their charges at critical structural points. 15 minutes to detonation, Yu reported as his team fought their way toward the central nerve cluster. All teams, fall back to minimum safe distance. Negative, Lee replied from the Soul. We stay until you're clear. It was pure human stubbornness, refusing to abandon their people even when survival demanded it. The strike fleet held position around the Queenship, fighting off wave after wave of Korthak defenders, while Yu's team completed their mission. The explosion, when it came, was visible from 3 star systems away. The Queenship's death triggered a cascade failure throughout the swarm's hivemind network. Across the battlefield, Korthak vessels suddenly lost coordination, their collective intelligence fractured into confused fragments. Target, all command nodes, ordered Colonel Bang. Hit them while they're blind. The counteroffensive that followed became legendary in military academies across the galaxy. Human and Volani forces, working in perfect coordination, systematically eliminated the leaderless swarm remnants. What had been an overwhelming threat just days before became a cleanup operation. But victory came with a price that changed everything. Long range. Sensors detect incoming fleet signatures, reported Communications Officer Ojiun. Multiple civilizations, over 300 ships total. They'll be here in 18 hours. The ultimatum arrived before the enemy fleets did. Chancellor Vex Prime of the Synthetic Commonwealth delivered it personally via quantum communication. The human intervention in Volani space has created an unacceptable disruption to galactic stability. You will withdraw immediately and submit to Commonwealth authority for processing. Refusal will result in the complete sterilization of all human assets in this system. Lee's response was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every species in the galaxy would hear humanity's answer. You had the power to save these people and chose not to act. We barely had the power to try, but we chose to sacrifice everything. The difference between us is why you'll always fear us, and why they'll always trust us. The Volani reaction was immediate and unanimous. Elder Velkes spoke for his entire species. If you face consequences for saving us, then we face them together. The Volani Republic formally withdraws from all galactic institutions and pledges our alliance to humanity. Tharanel added her voice to the declaration. You came when we called for help. Now we stand with you, whatever comes. As the combined fleets of the galaxy's major powers approached Volani space, humanity made one final broadcast. Communications Officer Ojiun sent the message to every civilized world, every oppressed species, every colony that lived in fear of powers beyond their control. If you need help, call. We'll answer. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of minor species, tired of being ignored by the galactic elite, pledged their support to the new alliance. The Free Species Alliance was born in that moment, a coalition of the willing, united not by conquest but by the simple principle that people should help each other. Admiral Seo looked out at the growing fleet of unlikely allies, human ships alongside Volani biovessels, joined by the cobbled-together craft of a dozen species who had never been considered worth protecting. Tactical assessment? He asked his staff. We're still outnumbered 10-1, Moon replied. But we've got something they don't. What's that? We've got a reason to fight that matters more than our own survival. The greatest battle in galactic history was about to begin, and for the first time since achieving spaceflight, Humanity would be fighting for more than just themselves. The Korthak swarm had never retreated before. In 3,000 years of expansion across the galaxy, they had never encountered a species that made them reconsider their approach to warfare. That changed the moment the human fleet opened fire. Captain Lee Hyun watched the tactical display as his 12 ships engaged an enemy fleet of over 200 vessels. By every logical calculation, this should have been a massacre lasting minutes. Instead, the Korthak found themselves fighting an enemy unlike anything in their genetic memory. The humans didn't fight like civilized species. They didn't form neat battle lines or engage in honorable single combat. They swarmed like angry insects, using tactics that made no sense to the swarm's collective intelligence. Target their supply ships first, Lee ordered. Ignore the obvious threats. The Soul, humanity's flagship, streaked past 3 massive Korthak destroyers to strike at a cluster of smaller vessels hanging back from the main engagement. These biomechanical creatures served as mobile factories, constantly producing new warriors and weapons for the swarm. They were heavily armored but poorly armed, expecting to be protected by their escort fleet. They didn't expect humans to fly straight through enemy fire to reach them. Captain Yu Seung-hwan commanded the boarding assault that changed everything. While the Korthak focused on the human ships darting around their battle line, teams of Marines in simple EVA suits attached themselves to the supply vessels like parasites. Breaching now, Yu reported as his team cut through the biomechanical hull with plasma torches. The Korthak interior was a nightmare of pulsing organic machinery and chittering worker drones. But the Marines had trained for urban combat in Earth's worst war zones. Alien tunnels filled with hostile creatures was just another day at the office. The first supply ship died from within, as nuclear charges detonated simultaneously throughout its living structure. Then the second. Then the third. In 10 minutes, the swarm lost production capacity that would have taken months to replace. Theranel watched the battle from the command center of Valanis Prime, her skin patterns flickering between amazement and horror. The Valani had tried to fight the swarm with the elegant tactics of civilized warfare. Energy beams at maximum range, formal challenges, attempts at negotiation. Even during combat, the humans fought like the swarm itself, as if the only rule was survival. They're targeting civilian evacuation routes, reported Velkes as he monitored the Korthak. Response: Theranel's patterns blazed with anger. Even in their desperation, the Valani couldn't imagine deliberately targeting non-combatants. But the Korthak had learned that threatening innocents could force their enemies into tactical mistakes. They had never fought humans before. All Valani ships, continue evacuation operations. Lee's voice came over the communication system. We'll handle the intercepts. What followed made the peaceful Valani question everything they thought they knew about warfare. The human ship Incheon, commanded by Captain Shin Woo-jin, deliberately flew into the path of a Korthak destroyer that was hunting civilian transports. The human ship was barely 1/10 the size of its target. The collision should have destroyed both vessels. Instead, the Incheon's crew had rigged their ship with every explosive device they could carry. The destroyer died in a fireball that lit up half the star system. The Incheon's crew of 60 had died to save 3,000 Valani civilians they had never met. This is insane, whispered Kevlon as he watched the tactical display. They're throwing their lives away. No, Theranel replied, finally beginning to understand. They're buying time with blood. Every sacrifice serves a purpose, she was right. While the Korthak focused on the spectacular destruction of individual human ships, they missed the larger pattern. Colonel Bang Jong-ho, the tactical genius coordinating the human fleet, was fighting a battle of mathematics and psychology. The swarm relied on overwhelming force and rapid adaptation. They expected enemies to engage their strongest units in direct combat, allowing the collective intelligence to analyze weaknesses and develop counters. Instead, the humans kept changing tactics every few minutes, never giving the swarm time to adapt. Phase 1. Destroy supply lines. Phase 2. Eliminate command structures. Phase 3. Fragment the enemy fleet into isolated groups. Phase 4. Annihilation. Dr. Yang Hai-rin's experimental weapons proved devastatingly effective against biomechanical targets. The acid rounds ate through living armor before the swarm could develop resistance. The fragmentation explosives scattered lethal shrapnel through organic corridors faster than healing systems could respond. The gas weapons targeted biological functions that the machine components couldn't compensate for, but it was the human approach to casualties that truly shocked both allies and enemies. When the Busan lost main power during an engagement with two Korthak cruisers, the crew didn't surrender or retreat. They rammed their dying ship into the enemy formation, detonating their remaining nuclear warheads at point-blank range. The sacrifice eliminated both enemy ships and opened a gap in their battle line that the remaining human vessels exploited with ruthless efficiency. Communications Officer Park So-young maintained constant contact with Volani forces throughout the battle, and the conversations revealed the growing cultural divide. "Why don't they surrender when their situation becomes hopeless?" asked a Volani ship captain as he watched a damaged human destroyer continue fighting despite critical damage. "Because there are people behind us who need our protection," Park replied simply. Surrender isn't an option when innocent lives are at stake. The concept was alien to both the Volani and the Korthak. The plant-based species had always resolved conflicts through negotiation. The insect swarm operated on cold biological imperatives. Neither could understand a species that chose death over failure when defending others. As the battle raged, reports reached the major galactic powers. Intelligence Director Kwon Tae-young of the Hegemony Council compiled footage that sent shockwaves through every civilized world. "They're not just fighting the swarm," he reported to his superiors. "They're winning. 12 ships against 200, and they're actually winning." The implications were terrifying. If humanity could defeat the Korthak swarm, a threat that the galaxy's greatest military minds had deemed impossible to stop, then humanity represented a danger to the established order. "Military assessment?" demanded the Hegemony Chancellor. "If they're willing to die for strangers," Kwon replied grimly, "imagine what they'll do to protect themselves." Back in the battle zone, the tide was turning. The Korthak swarm, for the first time in millennia, found itself on the defensive. Their bioships, evolved for overwhelming assault, struggled to adapt to an enemy that treated every engagement as a desperate last stand. Lieutenant Commander Oh Ji-eun coordinated the final phase of the operation from the Seoul's communications center. Her job was to ensure that every human ship knew exactly where they were needed most, when to attack and when to sacrifice themselves for maximum tactical advantage. "Gangnung, you have 3 Korthak hunters moving to intercept the civilian convoy from Sector 7, she reported. "Understood. Moving to engage," came the immediate reply. No hesitation. No questions about odds or survival chances. The human ship accelerated toward certain death without a moment's pause. The Volani watched in stunned silence as 12 human vessels systematically dismantled a fleet that had consumed 3 worlds. It wasn't just the tactics or the weapons. It was the absolute refusal to accept defeat when lives hung in the balance. By the end of the engagement, only 4 human ships remained operational. But the Korthak swarm's assault fleet had been destroyed, their supply lines severed, and their advance stopped for the first time in galactic history. Theranel's message to the human fleet was transmitted across all frequencies. "Why? Why would you sacrifice so much for people you barely know?" Captain Lee's response, broadcast from the bridge of the battered Soul, became the foundation of human philosophy in space. "Because someone had to. Because you called for help and we had the ability to answer. Because that's what people do for each other." The concept would reshape galactic civilization, but first they had to survive the response of the powers that preferred the old way of doing things. As repair crews worked frantically to restore the human fleet, long-range sensors detected new signatures approaching the system. The galactic powers had finally decided to act, not to help, but to contain the threat that humanity represented to their carefully controlled order. The real war was just beginning. Admiral Seo Dae-hyun stood in the war room beneath Seoul, studying the holographic display of humanity's entire space fleet. 12 ships. That was everything Earth could send to help the Volani. Every other civilization in the galaxy had thousands, yet they had all refused to act. "Status report," he ordered. Captain Nam Yoon-soo stepped forward. "All ships are ready for deployment. The Seoul, Busan, and Incheon are loaded with our heaviest weapons. The Jeju and Gangnam carry our marine boarding teams. The remaining 7 ships have been converted for support operations." SEO studied the ship specifications. Crude kinetic weapons, nuclear warheads, chemical explosives, technology that the galactic powers probably considered primitive. But these weapons had one advantage over the elegant energy beams used by advanced civilizations. They were unpredictable, hard to adapt to, and brutally effective. What about the enemy analysis? Sayo asked. Dr. Yang Hairin, Earth's leading weapons specialist, activated the tactical display. The Korthak swarm uses biomechanical technology. Their ships are part living creature, part machine. This gives them incredible adaptability. They can develop resistance to energy weapons within minutes of first contact. She zoomed in on the scan data the Vallani had provided. But here's the interesting part. Their adaptation seems focused on energy-based attacks. They've never encountered pure kinetic weapons or chemical explosives. Our primitive technology might be exactly what we need. SEO nodded grimly. And our intelligence on the Vallani? Peaceful plant-based species, reported Intelligence Officer Moon-Da-Un. No military conflicts in over 1,000 years. Their technology is incredibly advanced but designed for creation and harmony, not warfare. They're offering everything they know in exchange for our help. Their biotechnology alone could advance our medical science by centuries, added Dr. Choi Minji, who had been studying the Vallani data transmissions. But they're not bargaining. They're just giving it away because we said we'd help. The room fell quiet. Everyone understood what that meant. The Vallani trusted them completely, based on nothing more than humanity's word. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, intelligence networks buzzed with activity. The news that a primitive species was attempting to intervene in the Korthak crisis had reached every major power. In the crystal spires of the Confederacy capital, Director Quan Tae-young reviewed Earth's historical records with growing unease. What he found made his crystalline form pulse with alarm. This peaceful species had a history unlike anything in galactic records. War, he reported to the Council. Constant, unending war. They've been fighting each other for their entire recorded history. Every technological advancement has military applications. Their entertainment media glorifies combat. They have over 300 words for different types of conflict. The Council's prismatic form shifted with confusion. Then why hasn't the Galactic Survey classified them as a warrior species? Because they're new to space, Quan replied. They've only achieved FTL travel within the last decade. But look at their expansion pattern. They haven't established trade routes or diplomatic posts. They've built military listening stations and supply depots. They're preparing for war on a galactic scale. Back on Earth, the human fleet prepared for departure with an efficiency that would have terrified the galactic powers if they had seen it. Every citizen understood the mission. Innocent people were dying, and Earth was going to stop it. Captain Lee Hyun supervised the loading of his ship while Communications Officer Park So-young maintained contact with the Vallani. The conversations revealed fascinating cultural differences. They keep asking about our philosophical approach to conflict resolution, Park reported. They want to know what we've learned about peaceful coexistence, Lee almost laughed. What did you tell them? That we're still working on it, she replied diplomatically. The truth was more complex. Humanity had learned about peace, but they had learned it through war. Every treaty had been written in blood, every alliance forged in the heat of battle. They knew peace was precious because they knew its cost. Dr. Yang loaded her experimental weapons aboard the lead ships. Explosive rounds designed to fragment inside biomechanical armor, acid compounds that would eat through living metal, gas weapons that targeted biological systems. To the Vallani, these would seem like instruments of horror. To humanity, they were tools for protecting the innocent. The journey to Vallani space would take 4 weeks. During that time, the human fleet maintained constant communication with Tharanel and the Vallani leadership. The conversations grew stranger with each passing day. They sent us detailed tactical analysis of Korthak weaknesses, Park reported after the first week. But then they asked if we plan to negotiate with the swarm for territorial concessions. They still don't understand, Lee realized. They can't imagine a species that creates for the sole purpose of destroying. The second week brought more disturbing revelations. The Vallani shared their technology freely, sending blueprints for biomedical systems, agricultural techniques, and living ship construction. They seemed genuinely confused when the humans asked what they wanted in return. They say helping people is its own reward, Park explained. They can't understand why the galactic powers demanded payment before even considering assistance. By the third week, The cultural gap was becoming clear to both sides. The Volani began to understand that their rescuers were nothing like the civilized species they knew. The humans were learning that the people they were rushing to save lived in a way humanity had never achieved. Without fear, without conflict, in perfect harmony. "We're going to change them," Choi Min-ji observed during a senior staff meeting. "Just by being there, by showing them what we are, we're going to change their entire way of life." "And they're going to change us," Lee replied, "if we can keep them alive long enough." The fourth week brought them to the edge of Volani space and the first sign of the enemy. Long-range sensors detected massive bioships consuming the outer planets. The destruction was total, not just the Volani colonies but the entire ecosystem stripped down to bare rock. "Contact the Volani command," Lee ordered. "Tell them we're here." Theranel's response came within minutes, her biolinguistic pattern shimmering with desperate hope. "You actually came. We thought you might change your minds when you saw the scope of the threat." "We don't abandon people," Lee replied simply. "Show us where you need us most." As the human fleet moved into position, intelligence reports from across the galaxy painted a clear picture. The major powers were mobilizing their own forces, not to help fight the Korthak swarm, but to contain humanity once the threat was resolved. "They're afraid of us," Moon Da-un reported. "They see what we're willing to do for strangers and they realize what we might do to protect ourselves." Admiral Seo's response was broadcast to the entire fleet. "Let them be afraid. We didn't come here to make friends with tyrants. We came to save innocent lives." The final approach to Velanus Prime revealed the full scope of the crisis. 3 worlds had already been completely consumed. The 4th was under siege, its bio-cities burning as Korthak harvesters descended like a plague of metal locusts. The Volani defenders fought bravely but hopelessly. Their weapons, designed to redirect asteroids and clear space debris, barely scratched the adaptive hulls of the swarm ships. Their tactics, based on centuries of peaceful negotiation, were useless against an enemy that communicated only through violence. "This is Captain Lee Hyun of the Terran Fleet. To all Volani forces," Lee broadcast. "Fall back to defensive positions. We're taking over the engagement." The Volani response was immediate. "But there are only 12 of you. The swarm has hundreds of ships." Lee's reply would become legend among both species. "Then it's almost a fair fight. All human ships, weapons free. Let's show these bugs how Earth's children handle bullies." The galaxy's most dangerous predators had arrived to answer a call for help. What happened next would change the balance of power among the stars forever. The morning sun cast long shadows across the living city of Velthara on Velanus Prime. The buildings grew like massive trees, their walls breathing slowly as they filtered the air. Theranel walked through the bio-corridors of the Science Center, her green skin shimmering with worry patterns that any Volani could read. The attack had come without warning 3 days ago. Ships unlike anything in their databases had appeared at the edge of their solar system. They were dark, twisted things that looked more grown than built. The Volani had tried to communicate, sending peaceful greetings in 100 different languages. The response was silence followed by destruction. The first world to fall was Velanus II, a farming colony with 2 million inhabitants. The alien ships had descended like locusts, their bioweapons dissolving the planetary defense grid in minutes. Then came the harvesters, massive creatures that consumed everything organic, leaving only bare rock behind. The screams over the communication channels had lasted 6 hours before going silent forever. Theranel reached her laboratory where her research team waited. Their skin patterns showed the same fear she felt. These Volani had never seen war, never imagined such brutality was possible. Their people had solved conflicts through discussion for over 1,000 years. "The reports from Velanus 4? She asked. Her assistant Kevlon, his usual bright yellow dimmed to a sickly green, handed her a data crystal. "The same pattern. They arrive, they consume, they move on. Our defenders tried to fight, but their weapons are designed for asteroid clearing, not warfare. The enemy ships adapt to our energy weapons within minutes." Theranel absorbed the information through her palm interface. The alien ships, the survivors called them the Korthak swarm, were unlike anything in galactic records. They seemed to be part machine, part living creature. Worse, they learned from each encounter, becoming stronger and more resistant to the Volani defenses. "How long until they reach us?" she asked. 14 days, maybe less if they continue at current speed, Kevlon replied. The Council of Harmony is preparing for evacuation, but where can we go? These creatures seem to follow our biosignatures across space. Theranel moved to the great window that looked out over their city. Millions of Villani lived here in perfect balance with their environment. Children played in the living parks where plants sang gentle melodies. Elders shared wisdom under trees that had grown for centuries specifically to house their conversations. All of it would be gone soon, digested by monsters that cared nothing for beauty or harmony. The galactic powers, she said suddenly. Have we contacted them? Kevlar's skin flickered with confusion. You mean the Hegemony Council? The Synthetic Commonwealth? But they've never responded to requests from species like us before. This is different, Theranel said. This threatens the entire galaxy if these creatures keep expanding. Surely they would help. Within hours, Theranel stood before the Council of Harmony in their great living chamber. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns as the leaders of her people debated. Elder Velkes, his ancient skin bearing the silver patterns of great wisdom, listened as she explained her plan. A distress call to the major galactic civilizations, she said. We offer our biotechnology, our medical knowledge, our agricultural techniques. In exchange, they help us survive. Some council members flickered with hope, but Velkes remained dim. Child, those powers have ships that could stop this threat easily. If they haven't acted, it's because they choose not to. We are not the first peaceful species to face extinction. Then we make them care, Theranel insisted. We show them what we can offer. We show them what the galaxy loses if we die. The vote was close, but desperation won. Theranel returned to her laboratory and began crafting the most important message in Villani history. She poured everything into it. Their discoveries in biomedicine, their ability to grow living ships, their harmony with nature that had lasted millennia. She included detailed scans of the Korthak swarm, tactical analysis from their failed defenses, and population counts of the threatened worlds. The message went out on every frequency, in every language known to galactic civilization. Then came the waiting. The first response arrived within 2 days. The Hegemony Council's reply was formal and cold. The territorial dispute between the Villani Republic and unknown hostiles falls outside hegemony jurisdiction. We wish you success in your negotiations. The Crystalline Confederacy's answer came next. Military intervention carries unacceptable risks to Confederacy assets. We suggest diplomatic solutions. One by one, every major power responded with variations of the same message. Too dangerous, too expensive, not their problem. Theranel watched the responses with growing horror. These civilizations had fleets that numbered in the thousands, weapons that could crack planets, technologies that defied imagination. Yet they would let an entire species die rather than risk their own comfort. They're afraid, Velkes said when she showed him the responses. These Korthak adapt to any weapon used against them. Every major power is calculating whether we're worth the risk of exposure to their own territories. So we die alone, Theranel whispered. Perhaps, the elder replied. But we die as we lived, in harmony with what we believe is right. But the message had traveled farther than anyone expected. In a distant spiral arm, on a small blue-green world that most galactic powers considered a backwater, the signal was received by a newly built listening post. Captain Lee Hyun of the Terran Space Command was reviewing routine communications when the priority alert flashed on his screen. The translation software struggled with the Villani biolinguistic patterns, but the meaning was clear. Millions of innocent people were about to die. He called his senior staff immediately. Communications Officer Park So-young confirmed the signal's authenticity. Tactical analyst Kim Jin-woo pulled up what little data Earth had on that region of space. Xenobiologist Choi Min-ji examined the biological scans of both the Villani and their attackers. It's legitimate, Park So-young reported. These people are facing complete extinction. The attackers are unlike anything in our databases. Distance? Lee Hyun asked. 4 weeks at maximum FTL, Kim Jin-woo replied. But sir, we have no idea what we'd be facing. Our entire fleet is 12 ships. Lee Hyun studied the desperate message again. The Villani seemed genuinely peaceful. Their technology focused on creation rather than destruction. They reminded him of what humanity might have been if not for its violent history. Recommendations? He asked his team. From a tactical standpoint, it's suicide, Kim Jin-woo admitted. From a humanitarian standpoint, it's what we have to do, Choi Min-ji finished. Lee Hyun nodded. In the end, the choice was simple. These were people in trouble, and Earth had ships that could reach them. Everything else was just details. He opened a communication channel to Earth Command. Priority message to Admiral SEO. Request immediate mobilization for humanitarian intervention. Unknown hostile force threatening extinction of Volani Republic. Recommend full fleet deployment. Then he composed a response to the Volani distress signal. It was brief without the diplomatic language the galactic powers preferred. Message received. Help is coming. Hold on. Across the galaxy, the civilizations that could have saved the Volani continued their careful calculations. On Earth, humanity stopped calculating and started preparing for war. The final battle began at dawn on Volanus Prime, though dawn meant little in the void between stars. Admiral Seo Dae-hun watched the approaching fleet through the Sol's main viewer. Over 300 ships representing every major galactic power, their weapons trained on the small alliance that had dared to challenge the established order. Final count, he asked. 47 ships total, reported Captain Kim Jin-woo. 12 human vessels, 8 Volani bioships, and 27 others from species I can't even pronounce. The odds were overwhelming, but humanity had faced impossible odds before. What mattered was that they weren't facing them alone. The Free Species Alliance had grown from a desperate partnership into something that terrified the galaxy's rulers, proof that people would stand together when offered real freedom. Chancellor Vex Prime's final ultimatum came via tight beam transmission. This is your last opportunity to surrender. Withdraw immediately, and your species will be granted protectorate status under Commonwealth supervision. Admiral Seo's response was broadcast system-wide. We didn't come here to conquer worlds or demand tribute. We came because people were dying and we had the power to help. If that makes us criminals in your eyes, then we're proud to be criminals. The battle that followed would reshape galactic civilization. The Commonwealth fleet opened with a display of overwhelming firepower, expecting the Alliance to break and scatter like every other rebellion they had faced. Energy beams that could crack planets lanced through space, targeting the largest Alliance vessels first. They had forgotten that humans didn't fight like civilized species. Instead of meeting the attack head-on, the Alliance fleet scattered into a dozen smaller formations, each following tactics that made no sense to traditional military doctrine. Captain Lee Hyun led one group in a spiraling attack pattern that brought them dangerously close to Commonwealth ships. Captain Yu Seung-hwan commanded boarding teams that targeted enemy vessels from within. But it was the Volani who provided the key to victory. Their bioships could survive in the vacuum of space without life support, allowing them to implement tactics that would have been suicide for other species. Tharanel personally commanded a living vessel that attached itself to a Commonwealth destroyer like a parasite, slowly digesting the larger ship from the outside. They're not trying to win through superior firepower, observed Dr. Yang Hae-rin as she monitored the battle from the Seoul's Weapons Control Center. They're trying to prove that might makes right. We need to show them something different. The turning point came when Captain Shin Woo-jin of the reconstructed Incheon made a decision that would echo through galactic history. His ship was badly damaged, systems failing, facing certain destruction from 3 Commonwealth cruisers. Instead of retreating or surrendering, he opened a communication channel to every ship in both fleets. My name is Shin Woo-jin of Earth, he announced. 6 weeks ago, we received a call for help from people we'd never met. We came because that's what you do when someone needs you. Today we fight not for conquest or glory, but for the right of all people to live free from tyranny. His ship died in the next volley, but his words had been heard by crews throughout both fleets. More importantly, they had been broadcast across the galaxy by Alliance communication networks. The response was immediate and devastating to the established order. On dozens of worlds, populations that had been silent under galactic authority began demanding explanations. Why had their governments refused to help the Volani? Why was helping people considered a crime? Why were they fighting to stop those who protected the innocent? Chancellor, we're receiving priority communications from 17 member worlds, reported a Commonwealth aide during the battle. They're demanding we cease hostilities and open negotiations with the Alliance. Vex Prime's crystalline form flickered with rage. Impossible. No member world has ever questioned Commonwealth policy. They're not questioning policy, sir. They're questioning whether we represent their values anymore. The same crisis was spreading through every major galactic power. The Hegemony Council faced the first mass demonstration in their capital in over 1,000 years. Synthetic Commonwealth worlds experienced their first strikes as populations refused to support the war effort. The crystal spires of the Confederacy dimmed as citizens questioned the wisdom of their leaders. Meanwhile, the battle continued with increasing desperation from both sides. Alliance ships were outnumbered and outgunned, but they fought with a unity that the galactic powers couldn't match. Every species in the Alliance understood exactly what they were fighting for: the right to help each other without permission from distant authorities. Communications. Officer Oh Ji-eun coordinated the final phase of humanity's plan. While the main battle raged, she had been broadcasting Alliance principles to every inhabited world in the galaxy. The message was simple but revolutionary. People should be free to help each other, to form alliances based on mutual aid, rather than mutual exploitation, to choose protection over profit. Signal from the Valani homeworld, she reported to Admiral Seo. Elder Velkes confirms that every major population center is receiving our transmissions. The galactic powers are trying to jam us, but Valani biocommunication networks are too distributed to block completely. The real victory wasn't happening in space. It was happening in the hearts and minds of ordinary people across the galaxy who were hearing humanity's message for the first time. Dr. Choi Minji, monitoring bio readings from the Valani vessels, reported a phenomenon that no one had expected. The Alliance ships are getting stronger during the battle. Their biomechanical systems are adapting and improving in real time, sharing information across the entire fleet. It was evolution in action, not just technological, but social. The Alliance was becoming something new, a hybrid of technologies and philosophies that was greater than the sum of its parts. The end came not through superior firepower, but through moral exhaustion. One by one, Commonwealth and Hegemony vessels began withdrawing from the battle as their crews refused orders to fire on Alliance ships. The turning point came when an entire Hegemony battle group defected to the Alliance side, their commander announcing that he wouldn't fight people whose only crime was helping others. Chancellor Vex Prime found himself commanding a fleet that was dissolving before his eyes. His final message to the Alliance was transmitted with bitter defeat. You have no idea what you've unleashed. The galaxy requires order, structure, authority. Without it, there will be chaos. Admiral Seo's reply became the founding document of the new galactic order. We didn't unleash chaos. We unleashed choice. For the first time in galactic history, people can choose their own destiny instead of having it imposed by others. That's not chaos, that's freedom. 6 months later, the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The Free Species Alliance controlled over 100 star systems, all of them united by a simple principle: mutual aid and protection for all member species. The old galactic powers still existed, but their authority was crumbling as world after world voted to join the Alliance. Captain Lee Hyun, now promoted to Admiral, stood on the bridge of the new Alliance flagship, a hybrid vessel that combined human engineering with Valani biotechnology and innovations from a dozen other species. Through the viewport, he could see the growing fleet of Alliance vessels, each one representing a people who had chosen freedom over security. Admiral, we're receiving another distress call, reported Communications Officer Park So-young. Unknown species in the Andromeda Spiral, facing extinction from a machine intelligence. Lee smiled at the familiar situation. Response time? 8 weeks if we push the new FTL drives to maximum. Signal the fleet, Lee ordered. Tell them we have people who need our help. As the Alliance fleet prepared for another impossible rescue mission, the story of humanity's intervention in Valani space had become legend across the galaxy. It was told differently on every world, sometimes as a tale of military genius, sometimes as a story of technological innovation, sometimes as an example of political revolution. But the version told by the Valani, now humanity's closest allies, captured the truth that mattered most. When the galaxy fell silent, Earth's children answered. When the powerful turned away, the dangerous came to help. They taught us that true strength isn't the ability to destroy your enemies. It's the willingness to die for strangers. The galaxy's new guardians were ready to prove that lesson again and again, whenever and wherever people called for help. Because that's what people do for each other, and humanity had finally found its purpose among the stars. In the end, the galaxy's most dangerous beings had indeed answered the call for help. They were dangerous to tyranny, dangerous to oppression, and dangerous to anyone who believed that might makes right. But to those who needed protection, to the innocent and the helpless, they were the greatest gift the universe had ever produced. People who would cross the galaxy to help strangers, and who would never stop fighting for the simple principle that everyone deserves a chance to live free.